For 3 years, my wife and I endured sacrifices building our $20,000 down payment, finally making our shared dream home feel tangible. Every marriage, I think, is built on a shared story. A story you tell yourselves about who you are as a couple and, more importantly, who you're going to be. For my wife and me, for 3 solid years, our story was called The House. It wasn't just a goal, it was the entire architecture of our lives. We didn't just live in our small second-floor apartment. We were asterisk enduring asterisk it. We were serving our time knowing that every paycheck, every skipped vacation, every time we said no to a fancy dinner out, we were buying another brick, another floorboard, another square foot of the future we were building together. I'm Levi Morales. When this all started, I was 32 years old. My wife was 30. We'd been married for 4 years, and for 3 of them, our entire financial world revolved around one single line item on our banking app: house down payment. It was a joint savings account we'd opened together, a digital monument to our shared dream. And we were good. We were disciplined. We treated that account like a sacred trust. Every month, without fail, we'd sit down together, look at our budget, and make the transfer. It became a ritual, a little ceremony of our commitment. We'd watch the number climb thousand by thousand, and it felt like we were watching our future selves come into focus. $20,000. That was the magic number. After 3 years of grinding, that's where we were. $20,000. It felt heavy, important. It was the physical manifestation of 3 years of unity, of shared purpose. It was the cost of 1,000 packed lunches instead of buying takeout. It was the price of driving our older paid-off cars while our friends were leasing new ones. It was the sum total of hundreds of small daily sacrifices that only we understood. That money wasn't just currency. It was our past, our present, and our ticket to the future. We'd talk for hours about what that future would look like. A small yard for a dog we hadn't even met yet. A spare bedroom that could one day be a nursery. A garage where I could finally set up a proper workshop. My wife would scroll through real estate listings, her eyes lighting up as she'd show me pictures of charming little starter homes with big windows and original hardwood floors. "Look at this one, Levi," she'd say, her voice full of genuine excitement. "Can you imagine us having coffee on that porch?" And I could. I saw it all so clearly. It felt real tangible, just on the other side of that $20,000 wall we had so carefully built. Our life wasn't all sacrifice, of course. We were happy. We loved each other. But everything was viewed through the lens of the house. It was the reason for everything. Why am I picking up that extra shift for the house? Why are we staying in and watching a movie instead of going out for the house? It was our North Star. And it made the hard work feel easy because we were a team. We were in the trenches together, fighting for the same thing. At least that's what I believed. There was one part of her life, however, that existed outside the blueprint of our shared future. A part that predated me, a part she held on to with a fierce, almost possessive pride. It was her car, a 2021 Honda Civic. She'd bought it herself a year before we even got married. It was the first big independent purchase of her life. And she treated that car less like a vehicle and more like a trophy. It was immaculate, always washed, always vacuumed. Not a single stray receipt or coffee cup was ever left inside. It was her symbol of self-sufficiency, a reminder of the person she was before she became part of an us. I respected that. It was her property, her achievement. It was a clean, simple fact. Just like the fact that our savings account was asterisk our asterisk achievement. The lines were clear. What was hers, what was mine, and what most importantly was asterisk ours asterisk. But there was another one that was never quite so clear. One that got blurred and redrawn so many times I started to feel like I was going crazy. That line was drawn around her sister, Nova, 28 years old and living her life like a perpetual teenager who never had to face a single consequence. Where my wife and I were planners, building our life brick by brick. Nova was a storm tearing through her own life and leaving a trail of chaos for others to clean up. Bad jobs, bad relationships, bad decisions. It was a constant cycle. And at the center of that cycle always was my wife playing the role of savior. It was the one point of true recurring tension in our marriage. I'm not a cold person. I believe in helping family. But there's a difference between helping someone up and strapping them to your back while they kick you in the ribs. With Nova, it was always the latter. There was always a crisis, always a drama that required my wife's immediate emotional and often financial intervention. A phone bill that was 2 months overdue. a security deposit she couldn't afford for the fifth apartment in 2 years, car trouble, vet bills for a pet she couldn't properly care for. The list was endless, and each time my wife would step in, she'd give Nova $100 here, 200 there, always with the gentle admonishment of, okay, but this is the last time, Nova. You have to get it together. But it was never the last time. It couldn't be, because Nova knew the magic words. She knew how to cry, how to sound desperate, how to paint herself as a victim of a cruel, unfair world. And my wife, whose heart is 2 sizes too big when it comes to her sister, would buy it every single time. Her loyalty was absolute. It was primal. If I ever tried to gently push back to suggest that maybe we were enabling Nova instead of helping her, I was immediately cast as the villain. You don't understand, Levy, she'd say, her voice hardening. She's my sister, my little asterisk sister. She didn't have the same advantages I did. She's only 2 years younger than you, I'd counter, trying to keep my voice calm. She's a grown woman. We can't keep bailing her out. We're trying to save for a house, remember? And then would come the line that always ended the conversation. It's asterisk, my asterisk family, Levi. I know how to handle it. It was a wall I could never seem to climb. She saw my pragmatism as a lack of compassion. She saw my concern for our shared future as an attack on her family. So over time, I learned to back down. I'd sigh, clench my jaw, and let her transfer the $50 or $100 from her personal checking account. I rationalized it. I told myself it was a small price to pay for peace in our home. I told myself it was her money, her choice. As long as it didn't touch the big things, as long as it didn't touch our savings, as long as it didn't touch the house, I could live with it. I could compartmentalize it. That was the deal I made with myself. The money for Nova was a leak, a slow, annoying drip from a faucet I wasn't allowed to fix. But our savings account, our $20,000, that was the reservoir. That was the foundation. It was untouchable. It had to be. Because it wasn't just money. It was the story of us. And I believed with every fiber of my being that she believed in that story just as much as I did. I had to believe it. The alternative was simply unthinkable. I woke up the next morning, day 0, though I didn't know it yet, and the world was exactly as it should be. The sun was filtering through the blinds, my wife was already at work, and the quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in our apartment. It was a Saturday. I had the day off. My plan was simple coffee, a workout, and then maybe I'd spend the afternoon looking at real estate listings online just to dream a little bit, to turn our abstract goal into something tangible I could see on a screen. It was 9 in the morning when I finally sat down at my desk, a fresh mug of coffee steaming beside my keyboard. Every couple of weeks, I'd log into our joint savings account. It wasn't about micromanaging. It was a source of pride, a shot of motivation. Watching that number climb even by a few $100s was like watching the frame of our future house being built in real time. We had just crossed a major milestone, $20,000 flat. It was a beautiful round number, a number that felt solid. I typed in my password, took a sip of coffee, and waited for the page to load. The little wheel spun for a second, and then the number appeared. It wasn't 20,000. It was zero. $0.00. I blinked. I shook my head, trying to clear it. My first thought, instant and absolute, was asterisk, glitch, asterisk. It had to be a system error. I've worked in tech support before. I know the first rule, turn it off and on again. So I hit the refresh button. $0.00. A little knot of annoyance started to form in my stomach. Not panic, not yet. Just irritation. I logged out, completely cleared my browser's cache, and logged back in. The page loaded. 0.00. The number just stared at me. It was stark, absolute. My heart started to beat a little faster. Okay, Levi, I told myself, stay calm. There's a logical explanation. I navigated to the transaction history tab, my mouse clicking with a loud sharpness in the quiet room. I expected to see our bi-weekly deposits. Instead, there was only one recent entry, a single line item from the day before. Transaction type withdrawal. Amount $20,000. The breath left my lungs in a silent rush. The whole thing, gone. My mind scrambled, trying to build a narrative that made sense. This wasn't a glitch. This was theft. We'd been hacked. The knot of annoyance in my stomach instantly morphed into a cold, heavy stone of dread. 3 years of work, of sacrifice, of saying no to vacations and expensive dinners, all of it vaporized. My first instinct was to call my wife. I grabbed my phone, my hand trembling slightly. I needed to tell her. We needed to call the bank's fraud department, freeze everything, file a police report. I dialed her number. It went to voicemail. Hey, it's me. Call me back as soon as you get this. It's an emergency. It's about the savings account. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the last few words came out thin. I paced the living room, waiting for her to call back. Every minute felt like an hour. My mind was a whirlwind of catastrophic scenarios. How are we going to get the money back? Banks have insurance for this, right? But what if they claim we were negligent? The dream of the house, the little yard for a dog we hadn't even gotten yet. It was all dissolving into smoke. She didn't call back. After 20 minutes, I couldn't wait any longer. I found the number for the bank and dialed. The automated menu was torture. I mashed the 0 key until finally a human voice came on the line. I explained the situation, my voice tight with urgency. The representative was calm. She asked for my account details and security information. I could hear the gentle tapping of her keyboard. Okay, Mr. Morales, she said after a long pause. I'm looking at the transaction now. It was fraud, right? I asked, desperate. An unauthorized online transfer. There was another pause. This one was heavier. Sir, she began, her voice measured. According to our records, this was not an online transfer. The withdrawal was made in person at our branch on Elm Street. The blood drained from my face. In person, a hacker wouldn't go to a physical bank. In person, I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. But that's impossible. I was at work all day yesterday. I understand, sir, the woman said softly, but the withdrawal was processed by one of the 2 authorized signatories on the account. The world stopped. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic, the frantic beating of my own heart, it all went silent. There were only 2 authorized signatories, me and my wife. And I knew with a certainty that felt like a physical blow that I hadn't been anywhere near a bank on Elm Street. My brain was suddenly playing a slideshow of the last week, cast in a sickening new light. The hushed phone calls my wife kept having, the ones she brushed off as just Nova being dramatic again. The dark circles under her eyes I had attributed to stress. The way she'd been so quiet at dinner the night before. Just tired, she'd said. She wasn't tired. She was a liar. Then the final devastating puzzle piece clicked into place. A memory from about a week ago. Nova had called sobbing hysterically. My wife had taken the call on the balcony, but I could hear snippets through the glass. Words like a huge mistake and they're going to ruin me, and a number I hadn't paid much attention to. $20,000. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a receipt. My wife, my partner of 7 years, had walked into a bank and systematically dismantled our shared future. She hadn't been robbed. I had been robbed. She hadn't lost our money. She had given it away. She had taken 3 years of our life, our discipline, our dream, and handed it over to her black hole of a sister without a single word to me. I mumbled thank you and hung up the phone. It was 3 in the afternoon. 6 hours had passed since I first saw that 0 on the screen. The shock had burned away. The hurt was still there, a deep, cavernous ache in my chest, but it was being rapidly overtaken by something else. Something cold, clear, and hard as diamond. Resolve. I stood in the center of our living room and looked around. The photos on the wall, the couch we picked out together, the whole life we had built. It was a stage play, and I was the only actor who didn't know his lines were meaningless. She had made a choice. She had prioritized her sister's latest catastrophe over our entire marriage. She had proven to me that when it came down to it, I was not her family. I was a resource. Our future was a fund she could liquidate. The trust, the very bedrock of our relationship, was gone. I knew with chilling certainty that the marriage was over. But it wasn't enough for it to be over. An injustice had been done. A debt had been created. The scales had been thrown so violently out of balance that I could feel the inequity in my bones. My gaze drifted around the room and my eyes landed on the small bowl by the door where we kept our keys. Sitting on top was the fob to her car, a 2021 Honda Civic. The car she loved, the one she had paid off herself before we even got married. It was her pride and joy. It was hers asterisk. In the cold logic that now governed my thoughts, a new equation began to form. She had taken a joint asset to solve her family's problem. It was only fitting I take one of her personal assets to fix the mess she had made for me. It was a perfect, brutal symmetry. I walked over to the key bowl and picked up the keys. They felt heavy in my hand. I thought about where she kept the vehicle title in the small filing cabinet in the closet. A plan cold and precise began to form. The shock was gone. The grief could wait. All that was left was the math. $20,000 had been taken. $20,000 would be returned. Today. I didn't hesitate. My phone came out of my pocket and my fingers moved with a speed that felt disconnected from my body. I opened a marketplace app, took a few photos of the 2021 Honda Civic from our window, and wrote a simple, brutal ad. For sale 2021. Honda Civic, excellent condition, must sell today. First person with $20,000, cash takes it. No negotiations. I hit post. It was 3:15 in the afternoon. Next, I walked into our bedroom into the closet we shared. Tucked away in the back was a small gray filing cabinet where we kept important documents. Insurance papers, old tax returns, warranties. I knew exactly which folder held the title to her car. It felt wrong, like I was trespassing in my own home. But the feeling was distant, a faint echo from a life I was living just that morning. The man who respected those boundaries was gone. He had vanished the moment I saw that zero balance. In his place was a man who only understood accounting. I pulled out the crisp paper. Title of ownership. Her name printed in clear official letters. My 30-year-old wife, the sole owner. A premarital asset, something she was always so proud of. I placed it on the kitchen counter and waited. 5 o'clock. My phone buzzed. A message from a potential buyer. He had the cash and could be there in 3 hours. I replied with our address and a simple "see you at 8." 2 hours later at 7, she came home. She walked in with a sigh, dropping her purse on the floor like she always did. She looked exhausted, her face pale and drawn. She tried to smile at me, a weak, fragile thing that didn't reach her eyes. "Hey," she said softly. "Long day." I didn't say anything. I just stood there by the kitchen counter, watching her. My silence was a physical presence in the room, heavy and cold. Her smile faltered. She looked around, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "Levi, is everything okay?" I just pointed to their bank statement I'd printed out and left on the coffee table. Her eyes followed my finger, and I watched the last bit of color drain from her face. She knew. Of course she knew. She'd been waiting for this moment all day. I can explain," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "Can you?" I asked. My voice was eerily calm. "Can you explain 3 years of saving? Can you explain every extra shift I took every weekend we stayed in, every little sacrifice we made for that account? Can you explain $20,000? The tears started then, big, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. "It was for Nova," she sobbed. "She was in trouble, Levi. Real trouble." "What kind of trouble?" I asked, my voice still flat, devoid of emotion. "She owed people money, a lot of money, from gambling. They were going to hurt her. I had to help her. She's my sister." There it was, the justification, the reason she felt entitled to burn our entire future to the ground. "She's my sister asterisk," as if those 3 words were a magic spell that absolved her of all betrayal. There was no apology in her voice, no regret for what she did to asterisk us asterisk. Only a fierce defensive righteousness for protecting her family of origin. "So you helped her," I stated. "You took our $20,000, the money for our house, our future, and you paid a gambling debt for your 28-year-old sister. Did it ever occur to you to talk to me? Your husband. You wouldn't have understood," she cried out, the defensiveness turning to anger. "You've always been hard on her. I knew you'd say no." "You're right," I said, the coldness in my voice finally hardening into steel. "I would have said no, because I am a 32-year-old man who understands that you don't set your own house on fire to keep someone else warm, especially when they're the one who keeps playing with matches." My phone buzzed on the counter. A text. "On my way. Be there in 15. The final act had begun. I picked up the car title from the counter and a pen. I walked over and stood in front of her. I held them out. "You're going to fix this," I said. She stared at the paper, her eyes wide with confusion and horror. What is this?" "That is the title to your 2021 Honda Civic, and you are going to sign it over. I have a buyer coming in 15 minutes with $20,000 in cash." The sound she made was a strangled gasp. It was the first time she looked truly panicked. The money was an abstract number on a screen, something she could justify giving away. But the car was real. It was her possession, her independence. "No," she whispered. "No, Levi, you can't. That's my car. I bought that car before we were married. You can't do this." "I can't," I let out a short, bitter laugh. "You seem to be confused about how this works. You took a joint asset or asset and you converted it into a personal gift for your sister. You unilaterally decided our shared future was less important than her mistake. So now a decision is being made for you. A personal asset will be used to replace the joint one. It's a perfect brutal symmetry. You made your choice. This is the consequence. She shook her head, backing away. No, I won't sign it. It's illegal. You can't make me. I took a step forward, my face unmoving. You have two options. Option one, you sign this piece of paper right now, we get the $20,000 back, and we are made whole financially. Option two, you refuse. The buyer leaves, and tomorrow morning, I file for divorce. In that filing, I will detail how you liquidated $20,000 of marital assets without my consent. We will spend the next year of our lives and thousands of dollars on lawyers fighting over every single spoon in this apartment. Your car will be sold anyway to cover the legal fees. So you can sign this paper now, or you can sign a dozen different papers later. The car is leaving. The only question is how much pain and money you want to spend to get to the same result. The choice is yours. The doorbell rang. Her body crumpled. The fight went out of her, replaced by a wave of devastating defeat. She knew I meant every word. She looked at the title, then at me, her eyes pleading. But the man she was looking for, the husband who would have comforted her, was gone. She had erased him yesterday morning at the bank on Elm Street. With a shaking hand, she took the pen. Her signature was a messy, jagged line stained by a tear that fell from her cheek onto the paper. I took the title from her hand, not saying a word, and went to answer the door. The transaction was quick, impersonal. The buyer was thrilled. He counted out 200 $100 bills onto my kitchen table. I handed him the signed title and the keys. We shook hands. I watched from the window as her pride and joy, her 2021 Honda Civic, pulled out of our driveway and disappeared down the street forever. When I turned around, the house was silent. The argument was over. There was nothing left to say. The money sat on the table, a monument to our broken marriage. She was still standing where I left her, looking like a ghost in our living room. I walked past her, went into the bedroom, and pulled a suitcase from the top of the closet. I opened it on the bed and began methodically packing it with her clothes. T-shirts, jeans, the dress she wore on our first date. I didn't do it with anger, but with a quiet, somber finality. I was no longer her husband. I was an administrator closing a failed account. When I was done, I zipped the suitcase and rolled it into the living room. I placed it by the front door. The trust is gone, I said, my voice quiet but firm. It's permanently destroyed. You can't live here anymore. She didn't protest. She just nodded, her body hollowed out by the reality of her choices. At 10 o'clock that night, I drove her to her mother's house, the same way I had driven her 100 times before for holidays and family dinners. But this time we didn't speak. The silence in the car was absolute. I pulled up to the curb, put the car in park, and got out. I retrieved her suitcase from the trunk and set it on the sidewalk beside her. She wouldn't look at me. Levi, she started, but her voice broke. Goodbye, I said. I got back in my car and drove away, and I did not look in the rearview mirror. I got home to an empty apartment. It felt vast and quiet. The stack of cash was still on the kitchen table. $20,000. I sat down and looked at it. I had won. I had recouped the entire financial loss. The scales were balanced. I had severed myself from the endless, destructive cycle of her family drama. I had established a boundary of iron and fire. It was a total victory. But as I sat there alone in the wreckage of our life together, I knew what I had really lost. That money wasn't a symbol of a down payment anymore. It was just paper. The 3 years of shared effort, of dreaming together, of believing we were a team, that was gone. I had the asset back, but I had lost the partner. I had won the battle, but the entire world we had built together was the price of victory. And it was a price I would be paying for a very, very long time.